Friends, you are watching Don Performance Engineer YouTube channel. Today we are going to see about Mitsubishi Lancer diesel engine self motor problem. This is the Mitsubishi Lancer diesel engine. When key is got inserted and turned to ignition, only the rattling noise will come. Okay, this is the self motor issue, so we need to clean the self motor. This is the bolt removed from these bolt nuts and washer, everything. Okay, these are the child parts. So you see this little bearing, everything. So you need to be careful on it. Before you need to go working, keep all the child parts like bolt nut, everything separate. I taken brushes and toothbrush also for cleaning this self motor and petrol. You see, once this is the self motor, this is the bottom casing made up of aluminum, and this is the solenoid switch that will be used for activating the self motor when engaging with the gear pinion of the armature pinion to the flywheel. This is the when you clicking the ignition, turn on the ignition, the solenoid switch will be activated and move this gear to the flywheel. This is the magnetic housing. This is the metallic part. Once the outer case will be removed, you can see that directly see the armature. This is the plunger, electromagnetic switch. There is a spring. This is the housing for solenoid. Once you see the coil, how much of the carbon will be deposited inside of the brush and coil. This kind of carbon will deposited means it will reduce the armature EMF. Actually, carbon is a good insulating and resistance, so we need to clean that carbon deposit on this armature, brush and coil. Only carbon. You see, this is the gear housing. Once we ignition the key, the solenoid switch will be activated this push rod, and we see the housing inside there is an on gear. This gear will be engaging to the flywheel to run the engine. Basic concept, simple only. Once you engage the ignition switch, this gear will be engaged with the flywheel, and then armature will rotate the flywheel, and engine will start ignition and normal everything. You need to clear the carbon deposit inside and outside of the casing of the self motor. This is the systematic diagram: coil, armature, solenoid switch, and shaft, gear, everything. Okay, and this is the flywheel. Actually, the flywheel have some teeth on outer side. This is the useful for rotating the crank case to ignite the engine. Flywheel have number of teeth when comparing to the more amount when comparing to self motor. This is the flywheel. It depends upon the too much of torque need to the weight, and this is the housing assembled. This is the Mitsubishi Lancer diesel engine flywheel. See, the flywheel have under self motor housing same position. This is the flywheel teeth. When self motor engaging, the teeth will contact with the self motor and start spinning the crank. Okay, here too much of carbon inside and outside of the case. You see, clearly see, there is no visibility of copper lining, only carbon full of rust. Okay, this is armature also same like only. So petrol, Why some persons using like WD-14 or any kind of petrol is the easiest and simplest method, because it will be non-sticky and evaporated easily to atmosphere air, so no more wet. You see, when I pour the petrol in the armature, how much of carbon will become? See, once this kind of carbon will be having, how much it will be rotate. Only I used a little amount of carbon cleaning like a petrol. After cleaning, you see how much of carbon will be deposited on that plate. The gear housing will be fully cleaned. This is the bottom case of the armature brush, that also fully cleaned. When comparing to before, you didn't see any marking and it mark. Now it's cleaned, you see clearly everything. This is the solenoid plunger, everything cleaned, and keep it dry for some times. Even that spring also cleaned, you see, fully cleaned that solenoid switch. Bottom, no carbon deposit. Gear housing, that also cleaned, and then solenoid switch housing, everything cleaned. So this time it will work clearly. I think that armature fully cleaned. You see the visibility of the carbon reflection like before. Now this is copper fully reflected in sunlight. You see fully copper colored. This is the electromagnetic solenoid switch actuator. Finally the coil and then armature brush. You see reflecting of the plates of the coil, that will give too much of electromagnetic when comparing to before. Fully cleaned. Before you need to clean, you need to take a photocopy of that photo of the part number and model number. This will help you to buy a new or old, depends upon the part number you need. Armature and brush also in good condition only, not fully worn out. Little bit have, I think that 4 armatures or brush have only conditions. Everything will be copper, will be now cleaned, so you can visible copper clearly. When comparing to before, you can see all the copper parts, aluminum parts. Okay, see armature. This is the armature and then gear housing. This will what will happen when armature will start rotating. You see the gear housing will be rotating same direction. This is the principle of the self motor. Once this armature will be run to engage the flywheel with the solenoid switch, and the engine start running. Okay, first you need to use spring. Before you need to check that cleaned or not cleaned, like any debris, dust will be up. Once the current flow through the housing, plus the negative terminal, this is the switch, and the solenoid will be activated, and that also connected with the housing of the armature. Same principle for this yeah. You need to be careful on installing. Once the armature and then solenoid switch fork, when then gear housing fork will be activated in correct position, so you need to be careful on this kind of parts. And any wrong loading, everything happen means it will be damaged. When comparing to before, then the armature, coil, everything will be cleaned. No carbon, no dirt, everything. Once that solenoid switch and that plunger fork will be in correct position, you need to keep tight on that parts. Careful it before any damage happen. you need to precaution it, like wrong loading, wrong thread, everything. So you need to check one or two before threading the bolt. Finally, the gear housing and solenoid switch will be connected. Okay, now armature and coil press will be fixed. This is the coil and the brush. You need to be careful on it. Always ensure it's wrong loading or correct loading. When this self motor is a good technology in automobile, now most of the car come with small self motor like hybrid, everything, because most of the car have electrical motor for hybrid, so that kind of car don't need self motor. For weight reduction and production cost reduction, they don't use self motor. For racing purpose also same, like once you see the brush, that the bottom of the four coil have four brushes, have carbon brushes, that will be going to seating on this coil, armature coil. So you need to carefully push the brushes to insert the armature inside. Okay, we need to careful working on it, because that carbon brush is made up of carbon only. So what will, that is very soft and brittle. If you any force applied on that carbon brushes, that will be easily break. So no more production of the current through this coil, so self motor will not working. Okay, there is an actually four brushes, have carbon brushes. You need to that's in connected at the end of the carbon brushes, they have spring contact. Okay, so you need to expand that carbon brushes to insert the armature coil. Actually I have only one person, no any other persons to help me, so I used this kind of technique to hold the carbon brushes to insert the armature inside of the coil. It's very difficult, like one person holding camera, same working on it's, if any tripod or anything will happen means have, okay, in this kind of mechanical job always have two or three persons, like clamp or G clamp, everything, but so only one person, it's very difficult to work it. Now that armature brush is inserted into the bearing, but we need to insert in the bottom of the coil of the armature. You see the carbon parts, the copper parts, and now the brush will be in contact. Same like how I inserted means just like simple, just expand that brushes like your nose pillar, and seating on that bearing bottom, I used Allen key to hold that gap between the bearing and then brushes, because they have four brushes now. So another two brushes you need to manually hold, like expand like a nose pillar, that will create a gap. So once that gap will be created, you can easily insert the brushes. Now it finally fixed. You need to keep tight every bolts and nuts and correct torque, and check the position of the housing, gear housing, and this bolt because you need to check it. Actually what happened means some unfortunately I forgot to insert and the ball bearing. This is the gear housing. There is a ball, stainless steel ball, for reduce the friction between the armature rotating and pillion gear housing. This rotating parts always use a bearing or any kind of thing, but it's a small only, so they use only single ball. So this is the Japanese technology. Okay, carefully you need to insert a armature end of the part. First you need to see the bottom. You need to ensure check once before you need to assemble, because the errors are in correct position or everything in same manner. On the coil and the bottom of the self motor there is an aluminum cover for armature housing and brush housing. They are inserted in correct manner. Okay, finally installed. So now we take the ball. This is the stainless steel ball. This is the one single part that will give more rotational torque, like gear pinion to armature. When comparing to ball bearing, this small ball will be helpful for rotating the armature. So this is the gear housing. This will be rotating the armature, and once the ignition key ignited, the self motor will be activated to engage with the flywheel via solenoid switch. Okay, you need to be careful on that ball, so do not wrong loading it, because once the ball will be go inserted, it's very difficult to take out from the coil. Okay, finally I inserted correct manner everything. Now tightening the bolt, nut, screw, everything. You need to be careful on it. Actually the self motor is almost about 2 kg something, so we need to be careful. Do not apply force, and do not over torque everything, bolt, nut, everything. If you can force apply, it means it is made up of aluminum casing. See, any brittle or any crack will happen, that is very difficult. So please, my request, do not apply any forces, external forces like hammering and over torque like torque wrench. Before you need to hand tight it. Any shaking, if you need to shake, means it's any shaking object have any sound, abnormal sound came up, so you need to be careful on it. After you full torque it, like torque wrench, everything, first you need to tight in hand tight, and check any abnormal noise have normal like means, so you can fully tight. Okay, now that terminal connections like positive, negative, and everything we need to correctly give connections. Once hand tighted and check any abnormal available means you can fully tight it. You need to fully tight means, so what will happen now, no more gap between the armature and housing. Once, because self motor is connected outside of the engine and front of the engine, sometimes in a rainy time water will come fall inside, means that will be very difficult. So you need to full tight it, no more gap between the housing or anything. you check once before installing to the car. Fully tightened. If you give to this in a professional like service center, everything means they have every tools like they have fancy tools and they have spare parts like additional bolt, additional washer, and additional armature, brush, everything have. If they working on it, they will any damages or any missing parts means they will take from that shop and install it. But you are doing in own risk in home, so it's with you don't have any special tools or any extra spares. If anything will happen like any break or anything, so you are the responsibility for that part, so you need to buy it on your own. In this kind of car, there is in 2000 model, almost 25 years old. So what will happen means there's no shop available for this kind of spares, because that armature brass not belongs to Indian market, they are from Japanese market. And this engine will have only 2000 liters sorry 2 liters engine like 2000 cc diesel engine. So they have big armature, big coil, everything, because that 2-liter diesel engine need more amount of torque to produce the engine ignition, because diesel engine always have a compressed ignition. They need more amount of compressed air to ignite the diesel. But in petrol engine there is no like that kind of petrol. They have only spark plug and limited compressed air need to run. Finally fixed. I am going to install on this car. Actually I don't this car almost 8 months in the same position into rain and sunlight. How much of you see this car will be damaged. Actually it's not used almost for 8 months. Battery also drained, so everything jammed. What I am telling now, if you have anything like your project car, anything, you need to frequently operate it and soon complete your project. Do not hold more than 3 months or 4 months. What will happen means your new parts, like everything new installed means that part also getting damaged due to not using. So this is the shock motor finally cleaned and serviced. You see same like new one only. Now if you saw another person saw means you telling they will new install new part. If you have any doubt regarding this, you can text it on Facebook, or you can ask in comment section any doubts you have means, or you can directly message on Instagram. This is our WhatsApp group only for JDM cars and street racing meetups. Thank you friends.